one of the last piece I wanted to cover as we kind of round out this topic, as we talk about the cost profile, and it gets back to you, but one of the things, again, about orals is because this nature that most of them are precision or targeted drugs, is they are tied to a molecular diagnostic. And that companion diagnostic or that mutation that's been identified has created this greater understanding that mutations are major drivers of cancer, and that they may not be restricted on an anatomic basis. So it may not be a mutation that's only found in breast, but it may be found elsewhere. And that's led now to this consideration of next-gen sequencing as a means to test cancers for the mutations, which may be considered atypical, but nonetheless, if found, could then lead to a targeted intervention. Now, it's all hypothetical, right? But it's being done. So from a payer standpoint, what's your perspective on this, or what's the payer industry doing to address this? As you know, it could open up Pandora's box of fourth line and fifth line and sixth line of treatment that has both the companion diagnostic cost and a drug cost, and all of it is unproven, but is so tantalizing because of the science.
Yeah. Well, first, to be clear, if there is a targeted therapy based on a molecular mutation, whether it be MET-ALK or KRAS or NRAS or BRAF V600E, we're going to pay for that. I mean, the cost of the test is minuscule in comparison. I think the question of next-gen...
Where it's proven to be clinically valid and clinically useful.
Correct, yeah, right. The question of next-gen sequencing to identify potential agents in a particular patient's cancer is appealing because there are many cancers for which we don't have adequate therapies, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, for example. And there are also patients who have good performance status who failed traditional therapies. And the question is, do you guess at what could be used next? Pick from the laundry list of NCCN guidelines. Or do you identify whether or not somebody has a mutation that makes them eligible for a clinical trial? As you know, ASCO has their TAPER trial that they have 8 or 12 different drugs that are
right, but it's a restricted number of sites.
It's a restricted number of sites, but unfortunately, you have to have a known mutation to be eligible for that trial. As a health plan, we've decided that we'll pay for that. We pay for clinic participation in clinical trials, and it seems disingenuous not to pay for the test to determine whether or not you're eligible for clinical trials. So I think we're not ready for prime time yet, although interestingly, the NCCN in their non-small cell lung cancer pathways recommends next-gen sequencing because there are 7 or 8 different known mutations today.
So interesting, of course, for TAPER, probably to give people who are listening and viewing just a quick upside of TAPER. So, so TAPER is a concept whereby ASCO is sponsoring a trial in which it doesn't really prescribe what type of testing is done. Any kind of molecular testing. Could be full next-gen genome sequencing, but it could also just be a very specific test. So it's going to be done, and then they've gotten drug companies to pony up free drug so that free drug can be given to a patient who's got a matched target, regardless of diagnosis. So exciting, but you know, as we see often what happens is the notion of a trial gets translated as it must be proven. Right. They wouldn't be testing it if we really didn't know that it worked.
Right.
And so we see it happening in the community. So do you see that amongst your own doctors where they're starting to, you know, again, describe that patient as that younger patient, you know, they're great performance status, they failed standard of care. Let's take a look, and then if we can find a target, we'll treat the target.
Yes, I see that all the time, and I'm not sure who or how this is going to be paid for, but I think the best example, just to give the viewers an idea of what we're talking about, so you take a young lady who's failed her 8 lines of chemotherapy for metastatic breast cancer, and the breast cancer sample sent off for next-gen sequencing, and guess what? You know, the patient you know, has a abnormal you know, an androgen receptor that could be targeted. And so a lot of these patients are being treated with Xtandi, a drug that's FDA approved for the treatment of prostate cancer, and it's a drug that's known to interfere with the activity of androgen receptors. But of course, that's known in prostate cancer, but not really clearly known or understood how it works in breast cancer. But, you know, a lot of doctors, again, want to do the right thing for their patient and try to help them in any way they can. And so they prescribe these very costly drugs without really any clear understanding if that drug is going to benefit the patient. And of course, that puts guys like Dr. Fox in a very difficult position in whether or not they're going to pay for those drugs.
Well, I don't think it puts us in a difficult position at all if there's no evidence to support it.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
we say if it's FDA approved for that indication, or if it's in an approved compendium like the NCCN,
Right.
or if you can produce 2 peer-reviewed articles supporting the intended use, then we're obligated to pay for it. So there is a level of proof still required to cover in that circumstance.
But on the other hand, I'm sure you get heat from plenty of families on issues like this that I think would put you guys in a tough position. You know, it kind of reminds me of the days back in the 90s when, you know, the patients strong
Bone marrow transplants for
Yeah,
breast
exactly,
cancer, yes.
exactly.
Well,
So
they
it's
were-
a
they
similar
were-
type thing.
They were camping out and doing sit-ins on Genentech campus. I mean, it
Yeah.
got pretty serious, and in all fairness to the era, you know, when things weren't working and things were, there was this possibility that transplants were effective.
Yeah.
You know, you can see where it got out of control. I understand that the position you're taking, I think it's great because it's codified that here are the rules.
Right.
We're all playing by the same rule book. But I can imagine that member, you know, giving the call, and then if the member isn't going to be covered, then it's an out-of-pocket cost.
Right,
And now you're going to leverage all your personal wealth,
yeah, exactly.
you know, for treatment, and that puts then pressure back on the doc.
Right.
Do you really want to tell that patient, you know, to leverage all of their personal wealth
Yeah.
for that purpose?